Good afternoon, people. You are now tuned in to Urban Voices Radio. I am your host, Brad Harrison. I got my main man, Sean Mucker, in the building with me.
What's going on?
And I have my co-host, Miss T. Marie.
What's up?
What's going on, people? We have a very, very, very special show for you today. We have my man, Angelo, all the way from NYC, which is one of the co-founders of the Until Freedom movement.
That's a fact.
So for those of you who do not know, Until Freedom is an organization. You're an activist group, correct?
That's correct.
And I'll let him kind of describe the mission statement of the group. But they are currently here in Louisville, Kentucky, fighting for justice for Breonna Taylor. And at a minimum, the group has taken up residence in the city for at least 30 days. So, my brother, we are glad to have you here in the city, man. We always welcome everyone that comes in to help unify us and help in this fight for justice. So, my man, I'm gonna let you educate the people, let them know why you're here, let them know about the organization and what we can expect from Until Freedom while you were in Louisville, Kentucky.
Certainly. So a little bit about Until Freedom. We founded Until Freedom, myself, Angelo Pinto, Mysonne, Linda Sarsour, and Tamika Mallory about a year ago. And the main intention behind creating Until Freedom was that we wanted to create an organization that did all the things that we thought was not happening. So when we looked around and saw the legacy organizations, saw the activist organizations, and there's some great organizations around this country, I want to say that, we said that there are some gaps, there are some spaces that we can fill. But also, we started to think about, last year was the 400th anniversary of the first slave ships that came to America. And, you know, it was the year of return in Ghana. And what we said is, and what I started to say is, we need to begin to reimagine and think about what the next 400 years looks like. And it's our responsibility to create an organization that will usher us into the next 400 years and really trailblaze a new path for black folks. What got us here to Louisville was the death of Breonna Taylor, the murder of Breonna Taylor by Louisville Metro Police Department. And we found out about the case through attorney Ben Crump.
Okay. So So Ben Crump was the one that reached out to y'all for the case.
Yeah, we were, in fact, many of us didn't know about Breonna Taylor at the time. And Ben Crump was taking the case. And he reached out to us and said, hey, you know what, this is a very important case. We need to bring attention to this case. Can y'all help me do that? So oftentimes we partner with national attorneys who pick up particular cases and try to bring visibility to the case. We also try to pay specific attention to the cases of black women who are murdered by police. Because what we also know is that black men, although it's very infrequent that they do get justice, there are times when it has happened. But when we think about black women who've been murdered by police, we see no justice whatsoever. And we are making it a part of our responsibility to pay attention and elevate the stories of black women who've been murdered by police. So that kind of made jumping on the Breonna Taylor case a no-brainer for us.
Okay, so tell us about the organization. What year was Until Freedom founded?
Last year.
Last year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty new organization.
It's a new organization. Now, I'll say this. We've been working together for about a decade.
Yeah, I remember you, Linda,
Tamika Mallory, and my son.
Okay.
For many years in New York City, actually there was an organization that I helped co-found in New York City called Justice League NYC, and that's kind of where we all met, doing work in New York City around the death of Eric Garner. So many things in New York. We work with a group of officers called the NYPD-12, which is a group of officers that were suing the NYPD for the illegal quota system. There's a documentary called Crime and Punishment on Hulu. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It talks about it. Most recently, or maybe a couple of years ago, there was a federal prison in New York City called Brooklyn MDC, where the lights were off, the heat was out on the coldest days of winter.
I think I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that big old march. A couple of y'all got locked up and things of that nature.
Oh, well, there's been a few.
It's a few, okay.
So we went there and we basically said, we're going to camp outside the prison until they turn the heat on, until they turn the lights on. And they said, we can't do it. It's going to take too long. We got to get the electrician in here, and we have to get other specialists in to fix it. And we stayed, and in 2 days they figured it out. Less than 48 hours. The lights were on, the heat was restored. And there were people in there who hadn't seen a doctor, who were bleeding, who had serious illnesses and conditions. And then also what happened recently, or more recently, maybe about it might have been just a few months ago, right before we were in Mississippi, working at Parchment Prison. I don't know if y'all remember that there were a number of deaths that took place at Parchment, and we had some friends in Jackson, Mississippi, and we said, you know what, this is an important enough situation that we should show up and be visible. So we were doing that for a while, and now we're here working to get justice for Breonna Taylor.
Man, look, I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because that's the flip side of the coin that often gets ignored.
Right.
So when we talk about the criminal justice system, we can begin with just the disparities that happen on the street. Right. So we have black people that are often targeted more often than any other group.
That's a fact.
Then we also have when those black people are targeted and incarcerated, we have disparities in the justice system where someone non-black can commit a similar crime with a similar background and receive probation or the charges dismissed versus a black person going to prison. Yeah. But what we often miss is that we're fighting these disparities on the street, but once they get behind the walls, it doesn't stop as well.
Oh, that's right.
So the plantation kind of has transferred to the criminal to the prisons.
Oh yeah.
So no, go ahead.
We often say, and I learned kind of doing advocacy work in New York City, that there's a phrase or a term of art we use where we say the deeper you go into the system, the larger the disparity gets. So the number of arrests, there's a disparity that exists. But then the number of black people that are charged compared to white folks, the disparity grows. The number of black folks who are sentenced and the amount of time. So the deeper you go into the criminal justice system, the larger the disparity gets when you look at black folks comparable to white folks. And folks often look at it with respect to death sentencing. It's kind of one of the most overt ways to look at it. The number of black men who've been sentenced to death for crimes that white folks do not get sentenced to death for. So it's certainly a fact and it's true.
Okay, so with the Louisville protest, what does Until Freedom? I know today Until Freedom participated in a pop-up. What is it? A farmers market. Farmers market today.
Right. Pop-up, pull-up farmers market.
So in the quest for justice for Breonna Taylor, you guys just aren't here petitioning legislators and petitioning law enforcement. You're also essentially feeding the community, not just with food, with knowledge, with nourishment, with mental stability. So what is Until Freedom doing while they're here?
Well, we said we wanted to do something different too. Thank you. We said we wanted to do something different, right? And the different thing that we wanted to do was, we often talk about when folks go into communities, the black and brown community, it feels like they're just taking from the community. They're withdrawing from the community, right? And our thing was, we didn't want to withdraw, we wanted to make a deposit, right? And part of the way that we felt like we were going to be able to make a deposit was by actually doing community service. Oftentimes, when you look at the movement, there are particular organizations that use particular strategies, right? So when you look at the protest movement and the national uprisings that happen, usually what folks use is civil disobedience, right, or protest. And then when you look at other organizations, for instance, who are doing political campaigning, they'll go knock on doors, right? They'll meet people, they'll drop leaflets. And then you have organizations that actually just do community service. They just give back. And what we said was that if we were going to move to Louisville, we wanted to combine all three. We wanted to knock on doors and hand out literature. We wanted to engage in civil disobedience and protest. And we wanted to deeply invest and deposit in the community food, finances, and any resources that we had so that we could really begin to show folks what it would look like and what would be necessary to transform Louisville. We don't believe that, we talk about police violence. But one of the things I often say to folks is that police violence is a symptom of other forms of violence that black folks have experienced in the black community, kind of experiences. And for me, the most overt form of violence we often see is poverty as a form of violence. So part of what we want to do, and in food deserts, right? And folks not having access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and of course the way in which that impacts our health and the public health of the community. So we said that if we're going to move to Louisville, when we do, we're going to make a deep investment in the community beyond just seeking that the murderers of Breonna Taylor get held accountable. We were going to invest in the community to show them we're here for you as well, and we want to transform the landscape of the city.
So are y'all building Until Freedom here, like a organization,
like a chapter?
Yeah, a chapter here in the city?
You know, I don't know. I don't necessarily foresee that in the future. But what we have done is build coalition. There's a number of organizations that have been on the ground doing the work for a long time, and some new, given kind of the new uprising that we've partnered with them. I mean, we're at the Urban League today. Kentucky Alliance Against Racism, we've been doing work with them. There's an organization called No Justice, No Peace. So what we've really done, I think, in Louisville is build coalition and said, these are the organizations that we're working with a sister named Katera at the ACLU, who was instrumental in the No More No Knocks. Right, that's right. And Adam Scott. Right. So what we're really trying to do, more than just really create a chapter here, is align all the folks and power brokers in the community. That's right. And if that's something folks want to do, that's fine. There's also kind of a group that has sprung up from what we did, the Louisville 87. The 87 folks who I was a part of, that got arrested in front of Daniel Cameron's house. Many of them from Louisville. And we've really built community amongst that group. So in many ways, while we haven't necessarily started a chapter of Until Freedom, we've certainly started a coalition and have folks who I believe will now have lifelong connection to the Louisville 87. Like, it's my family. There were about 22 brothers who were arrested, and we were all in the same cell. And, no one wants to go to jail. Right. At least for me, I don't want to go to jail. I don't look forward to that, And you also never know what's going to happen when you go to jail. Yeah. Like, I remember it was a hot day, and we had gave folks sweaters because we were like, it might be cold in the cells. You don't know how long you're going to be there. So I had a sweater on. You have on mask, all of this stuff. And then, you get cuffed, and then they put you in the back of a paddy wagon. And we were tight in there. It was about 6 of us in the back. It was dark, no air. And I remember for me, I was
in a hot box.
Listen, I had a breakdown in there, in the back of the patio. I was like, this is too much. I was like, I can't take this. So, what ended up happening after we different folks spent from 12 to about 18 hours, right? They just kept us in there. And we knew we were supposed to be released that night because we had heard from the attorneys that the paperwork was done. So they really just kept us in there to intimidate.
Try to set an
example. I mean, woo! And for some people it was hard. Like, some people really broke down and couldn't really deal with all that came with it. But in the cell I was in with the brothers, we really built a tremendous amount of camaraderie. And we started to say free the guys. And it became really what brought us together around who we were. We got to really learn who we were sitting next to, because we really didn't know each other. For the most part, we had put out a call for folks to come engage in civil disobedience, and we didn't know who would come. And about 400 people showed up. And then 87 decided, some people was like, I'm not getting arrested, I'm out of here. But about 87 folks said, I'm staying and I'm getting arrested. And we really built community with those folks. And I started to understand more the organizing strategies of the 60s when they got arrested, because it wasn't just to get arrested, but it was to build relationships and understand each other and build community and learn how to further the organizing efforts. Because even the folks who are giving out food now, a lot of them are 87.
Right.
It's the community, it's the family that we've built. So it was a tremendously transformative experience. I don't think Daniel Cameron got the picture and really understood what we were trying to do. But, we were just trying to place pressure on him to do the right thing.
So how did y'all feel when y'all realized that he gave y'all felony charges? What was the mindset when y'all received that information?
People were shocked. I mean, what we thought originally, and we had attorneys on the ground. We have many attorneys. We're working with Crump. We're also working with a local attorney who's fabulous, attorney Lanita Baker. She also represents the family. She actually represents the 87 with the team of local attorneys as well. And, we had a conversation. Also, Attorney Lee Merritt was here. And we had a conversation and said, what are the possible charges we could get? And we had a conversation. We said, disorderly conduct, depending on where we get arrested, we knew that there were certain charges that would happen. But we knew misdemeanors. We said at most, you might get a misdemeanor or 2.
Right.
Right?
Not
1
a
or 2. Listen, when that thing came through, because people didn't know. But I remember when the officer was writing up my slip, he had set a charge, and I was like, hold on, wait, now that don't sound right.
And it was writing, right?
No, it was intimidating a witness.
A witness.
A witness. Really?
Intimidating.
That's right.
So basically intimidating Daniel Cameron.
Right. Someone who was involved in
a political
existing investigation.
Right.
right? Which is basically like intimidating a witness, which is traditionally used in domestic violence cases. If someone is like, you know, pressing charge against someone, now you're like trying to you want them to drop the charges.
Right.
So even the scenario didn't make sense. But, you know, people were calling the attorneys while they were locked up, and then or hearing from family members calling their mom, calling their dad, calling their spouse, and saying, "Hold on, wait, Joe, you got a felony." And people were like, "What? You got a what?"
So they didn't take out cell phones or nothing like that.
Well, no, they took the phones. We had the jail phones.
Okay.
So we were calling from our call, and people were finding out that, you know, we got charged with a felony, and I think a lot of folks were taken aback. We were even shocked by that,
Right?
And because we told folks, listen, no matter what happens, we here.
Right.
We're gonna make sure you get out of jail. We make sure we're gonna fight these charges, and we're gonna do all those things, that's our commitment. And then, you know, a couple of days after, they dropped the felony, and in part it was because of the white supremacists that went to the governor's house.
Yeah.
And basically were hanging,
Right.
you know, a dummy of with the governor's face on it.
Right.
And guess what? Not only did they get charged with a felony, they didn't get charged with nothing.
Right.
They didn't get arrested. They got to do it and go home and have dinner.
Exactly.
Well, let me tell you the significance of this from the other side. Right?
Yes, please, let me hear it.
So from a side that you may not be looking at, right? Because we've covered pretty much everyone involved in this Breonna Taylor death since it's been from a media standpoint.
Right.
And I've written a lot about it. And although receiving that felony was shattering to you, right?
Yeah.
For me, I love to see it. And let me explain first.
Oh, no, us too. I'm with you.
I love to see it, right?
Yeah.
Because now we got to address all the disparities that happen in the criminal justice
Most
system.
certainly.
So not
Most
only
certainly.
one of the biggest, what I call crimes that happens in the criminal justice system is black people are often charged and overcharged.
That's a fact.
And for the first time ever that I believe in history, because when you guys were arrested, it made national media. It went everywhere, right? So it made national media, which was a good thing.
USA Today, all of them were covered.
It went USA Today, it went CNN. It even went to places like the Shade Room and places, and TMZ, right? So it went to those places, right? So when I think this was the first time on a major scale, on a major media scale, that the world got to see how black folks are overcharged in situations to try to force you into copping out to a lesser charge, or to force you to plead guilty to a crime.
Right.
And when I saw that, I said, "Wow, they're playing into our hands essentially, because this is something I've been screaming about for years." So they overcharged you, and then they had to go back amongst pressure from the community and drop those charges, right?
Yeah.
So now they're saying, well, we knew these people should have been charged in the first place with these felonies.
Yeah.
But this is the fight we fight every day, man. So we salute you guys, man, because not only that happened, you shine light on that. You shine light on the treatment that people often receive when they're arrested. You say that you were put in the back of... Because our thing is that no matter what someone does, whether it's drug dealing, whatever it is, right, there's a system set up that you're supposed to face justice in a courtroom.
That's right.
You're not supposed to face
justice.
justice. Yeah, you're not supposed to face justice in the back of a paddy wagon being sweated out at 200 degrees, you know?
Right.
So, man, we salute you guys for what you do, man. And every time you come here, now it's making media. You know, it's making nationwide media. And people say the criticism has been, well, they just came to get arrested for the media attention, right? And I'm saying, yeah.
Listen, we say the same thing. Tamika always says, she said it the other day, they were like, oh, so you guys just want to, be on the news. We said, well, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And it's not we want to be on the news, but we know if this issue gets out of the public light, Breonna Taylor will not get the kind of justice she would have gotten if we kept the visibility up. Like, it's actually a tactic and a strategy. And what you were saying is true, too. For us, it was like, you know what, arrest us and treat us bad to expose yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, basically, they fell right into to what y'all was trying to organize and what y'all was trying to do.
Right.
I mean, what I see is that, a lot of we having a lot of organizations come here, but we don't have them as organized as y'all are when y'all come here, because y'all came pretty where y'all was strategic.
That was part of the formation of Until Freedom. Like, it was a strategic to say, who's the best of the best? and let's put them together. Like, I mean, Linda and Tamika, they organized the Women's March. You know, they say the largest gathering in American history. You know, so these are folks who know we know how to organize some people, and know how to get some justice and get what we want. So I think we said let's bring it to Louisville, but not only that, we've been training folks.
Yes,
we've been saying we want to make sure Louisville has what Louisville needs if we don't come back. But we said we're going to make this a home. Even whenever the day comes when we said we're going to step out, we said every other week we're going to be back. It might be 2 of us, it might be 3 of us, but we're also thinking about the ways in which you shift the way people think about organizing. Like, we know in the 60s, around Operation Breadbasket, King moved to Chicago because he was like, you know, we want to end slums.
Yeah.
And they moved to Chicago. You know, it was probably one of the campaigns that people would say was least successful, but he was on to really confronting poverty as violence across America, particularly in the urban north. And I think we were taking a page out of his book to say, listen, we're going to move someplace too. And we're going to expose the injustice in a part of America that people don't pay attention to. But it's just important as New York, as Atlanta, as California. It's just as important, if not more, because you all know Mitch McConnell up in here.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, right.
So we know that there's layers and levels to this.
Yeah.
And many folks, it's so fascinating because many folks just don't know that, right? Like Louisville, regardless of what people say, is a very important city. Kentucky's a very important state when you talk about the political landscape of America, and we're raising some of that attention so folks around the country say, listen, pay attention to what's happening in Louisville. Like, don't forget.
Yeah, because I don't think a lot of people are really paying attention to the political aspect of how big this election is, not only for Mitch running, but also for the presidential election. Because they go hand in hand.
That's right.
So we got to get one out before we can get the other one out.
That's what I've been saying. Ditch Mitch, man.
Yeah.
Ditch Mitch.
Yeah.
Move Mitch, get out the way. We gotta get him out of there.
And I think it gained a little attention when Booker actually ran against Mitch. It gave people
It's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Booker.
Yeah. So, man, this organization, I was looking at Until Freedom, and you're right, man. You got some of the heavy hitters involved in activism on board. And hopefully, one of these Saturdays, we can get Tamika and Mysonne and the group up here, man.
Listen, most definitely.
So I was researching Tamika, and I didn't realize she's been into activism her entire life. So her parents were involved in Sharpton's activism
They
group.
were 2 of the earliest members of the National Action Network, which is the organization that Reverend Al Sharpton started. That's correct.
I read it too.
So she's grown up in activism.
Yeah.
And then when I look at Mysonne, right? So you take someone like Mysonne, and me being the hip hop man I am, right? Yeah. So I've seen the transformation of Mysonne, but a lot of people don't know Mysonne's story. Mysonne is actually someone that spent 7 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. So I think that began to shape his activism. You know,
it actually started. He tells a story of the death of Trayvon Martin, and he was actually in Florida when the verdict of the case was announced, and George Zimmerman was found not guilty. And he talks about how, hearing that verdict, he had a son the same age as Trayvon at that time, he broke down and started crying. And because he said when he was watching, he was like, he just knew the man was going to be guilty.
Right. Yeah.
He just knew. He was like, there's no way this man gets off for what he did. And of course, we know he got found not guilty. And he said it really made him think about everything he was doing and his son's life and what it means to be young and black and in America, right? And he wrote a song about it, and it really just changed his trajectory from there.
Yeah, so it took him from being an entertainer to more activist.
Yeah, he called him a raptivist.
Yeah.
Then you call him a journalist.
And then
we need divists all over the place.
Yeah, and then you have Trey involved.
Oh yeah, Trey. I was trying to get him to come too, but he had to step out. I was like, Trey, you'll pull up. He was out there with us.
And you know, Trey has had his own adversities as well. Trey, in his own city, in Houston, Trey has been putting on an event every year.
Trey Day
every year. And despite Trey doing that every year in the city for years, Trey was banned from Houston radio for close to a decade.
Well, it's because of what he's talking about, right? And it's the same like mice. Like these, I mean, it's deep to be with them and think about it because these are brothers. First of all, they could go into any hood of America You know, we was just in the West End in a park. I don't remember where it was. Everything was happening there. I was like, listen. Wow.
Yeah, it took him to the West.
Yesterday. I was like, it was like a baby shower or something. I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been with mice even in New York City, like after shootings happen in the housing projects and literally going into the community to try to stop violence. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And not too many, particularly brothers in the industry, could do that. I don't know who else could do that. Yeah. And Trey's the same way. After we were in Minneapolis, after the murder of George Floyd, we went to Houston because, you know, George Floyd is from Houston.
Yeah.
And Trey had 60,000 people in the street. You know?
Yeah, so I was about to say, it was 60,000. He done brought the whole city out.
Listen, so these brothers are the brothers that should be on the radio, but are not. Mm-hmm. These are the brothers who are doing what in our communities we say the big homies should do. They're looking out and taking care. But the industry has a lot to lose if brothers like that come to the forefront. So
there's only one other person that comes to mind I think can do something like that, and that may be Killer Mike. Other than those three people, I can't think of anyone else.
I think T.I. done probably.
But T.I.
he done advanced to that place.
He has, but he's already what you would consider a mainstream artist.
Okay,
he's someone like Mysonne and Trey, which I consider underground artists.
Yeah.
To actually be still connected with the streets, they can go out there without security.
And not only that, they're on the front line. Like, to be on the front line consistently is a different thing. Not to take anything away from Killer Mike, like just to be in the street with it, regularly is a thing. Like that's a powerful thing. And you know, we've done a lot of stuff with T.I. even in Atlanta. So those are both strong, positive brothers that are trying to elevate the movement as well.
All right, so tell us. You've had experience in activism in New York, which is a larger city, and NYPD is notorious for their
corruption. Say it.
I want to say hatred of black men. You know what I mean? But so you've had experience in this field. What tactics in New York have worked for you and been successful, and are any of those tactics going to be employed in Louisville?
You know, New York is a monster. The thing that has helped us in New York a little bit was to have allies in the NYPD. Like to have officers that said, you know what, the NYPD is corrupt. They're doing and using illegal practices. That helped us out tremendously. A lot of the officers were targeted and experienced severe retaliation. But it allowed us to say, listen, NYPD, we're not saying that from the outside looking in. People on the inside are saying you're horrible, right? And what happened was they had to begin to shift internal policies, like things that happened in days. They were like, listen, we can't do this anymore. They used to hide in the train station in the broom closet, and when people hop the turnstile, jump out and arrest them. Wow. Right? And one of the things the officers would say, they know visibility deters crime. Yeah. So if an officer's standing at the turnstile, someone's not going to jump it. Right. But what they did was they hid to watch you jump so they can make an arrest. So, and they were targeting teenage black and brown boys. We have all of that on tape in that documentary, Crime and Punishment. So it was very useful to have officers on the inside that exposed the NYPD. But the other thing that was necessary, which I think is already happening in Louisville, is folks just saying, listen, we just ain't going to take it. We're going to be in the street. Yeah. We're going to be outside. We're going to get arrested if that's what happens. But we're going to confront the police and expose them for what they are. Like, that's another thing that's helped kind of this defund the police movement that's happening in New York, where they just said there's $1 billion that's going to come out of the police budget in New York City. It's a $6 billion budget. I mean, $6 billion for one police force in one city in America.
That's heavily militarized.
Oh, tremendously. That's where a lot of the money goes.
Yeah.
And the community's not safe.
It's a business, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, it's big business.
See, these police departments spend a lot of money with the military-industrial complex.
That's a fact.
So they buy, like when you look at it and you say, now someone like New York, I guess an argument can be made in a place like New York, but for smaller cities, you ask, what does a police department need with a military tank?
To me, I don't think there's any excuse, even in New York City. Like if you have a military level issue, bring in the military.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Why? The police going to be the military too?
Right.
Because what happens and what we witness is deep, because you're not dealing with military level conflict, so now you're using military grade equipment on citizens.
Right.
And people who are protesting, right? I've been tear gassed, and it's just like, why are y'all doing that to us? Even if we're outraged and we're banging on the doors and banging, I mean, come on, you're going to do all of that? Yeah. Folks who are really not violent you're going to come and meet them with excessive force and violence. It's not necessary. What I've seen in cities throughout the country during this uprising is that the police are exacerbating violence. People want justice. People don't want to fight the police. And people aren't out there with guns. And then it's like, why are you continuing to meet non-violence with excessive force and violence? They're exposing themselves.
Great point. So while you're here, if you haven't already, I would like the group to do some research on David McAtee. I'm sure you probably have, but if you haven't, this was exactly a case of what you're talking about. So David McAtee, when the uprisings began here in Louisville, the early days, the first days, which happened nationwide when George Floyd kind of went viral, they were out-of-town protesters that came into all these cities, and they kind of looted and whatever, right? That only lasted a couple days.
Right.
So the regular protests continued.
That's right.
Well, the Louisville mayor brought in the National Guard. Well, actually, the governor, I think, brought the National Guard. So the National Guard was brought into the city to help quell some of the violence, so they say. Yeah. So they were here for a couple days. The National Guard decided on one of these days, well, the city decided on one of these days to issue a curfew. Curfew, I believe it was, 9 p.m.? 8 or 9 p.m. Just for whatever argument's sake, it was 8 or 9. So there was a curfew in the city.
9 o'clock, I think it was 9.
There was a curfew in the city. The protests were all happening at 6th and Jefferson, at what they call it Justice Square now. Okay, so Breonna Taylor Park. So the National Guard set up little substations with LMPD, and I actually visited one of these sites, and it was on 9th and Broadway. Right. So at some point, they decided to enforce this curfew, and the National Guard proceeded up Broadway into West Louisville, which is predominantly black, and they went up to 26th and Broadway.
That's not the chef you took.
Yeah,
yeah.
26th and Broadway, right? Mm-hmm. So he has a barbecue restaurant on 26th and Broadway. Now, in the hood, it's like this, man. The hood didn't really, I don't want to say didn't care, wasn't participating in the protest. The hood going to do what the hood did. So the protests were taking place downtown. Even though there was a curfew, the hood still had the club on 26th and Broadway. They hang out in the parking lot after the club. They do what they do. Right. It's a normal routine, right? So National Guard proceeds up Broadway. And if you ever checked out a New York Times video, I'm going to send it to you, and it shows it all. Definitely. So they come up Broadway, and they come up with the rubber bullets, and there's another round, it's called pepper rounds?
Pepper balls.
Pepper balls, right? Mm-hmm. So the video shows they approach people on the parking lot of the gas station and of, we call them Yaya's barbecue stand across the street. They began firing, right? So you know when you fire in the hood, people didn't know what they were firing. They running, right? So they ran in his business. He's thinking that some outside, someone's trying to rob, he's being shot. He raises out the building, fires a warning shot in the air. The first one goes off, he ducks back in, he looks out again, fires a second one. He does, National Guard hit him. They hit him and killed him on the scene, right? So that case, we had we had Commonwealth attorney up here last week. He's equivalent to a DA in New York. Yep. So he was up here last week. So that case is still under investigation, which I didn't know. Yeah. But police responded with force, and out of that force, someone was killed. Right. Now that action caused the chief of police to be fired. Right. So they fired him on the spot. People have been calling for him to be fired for the past 3 years, right. But that was the straw.
Broke the camel's back.
It was it.
Well, they just sent him to early retirement.
Right.
Well, see, that's what I heard.
That's what happened. That's what happened.
Yeah, it was early retirement.
Officially, it was a firing, but he gets to keep his pension
leave or something like that, where they still let him get his retirement and all that.
Well, that's the challenge with so many cases. Even the officer in the George Floyd case is like, in many states, qualified immunity. So unless you could keep everything. Unless in some states you're convicted of a felony. And we know even when officers are charged, sometimes they're never convicted. And if they are convicted, it's not often the most serious charge. So it's a huge issue.
Okay, so back to my question. I got around it. Are there any tactics that you deem successful that may be employed in Louisville?
I think you have to expose the monster. And I think that's one of the big tactics. It's like, begin to pull the curtain back. Like, folks in Louisville know how bad the police department is, but the rest of the country doesn't. Daniel Cameron and Mayor Fisher will ignore it. But if you create enough attention and you expose enough injustice, you're going to get some change. And I think that's what we're beginning to see, like what y'all mentioned about the chief, even though it's early retirement. What's starting to happen is like, oh, wait, this can't stay the way it exists now. If we expose the levels of just corruption. I mean, most of the officers involved in the murder of Breonna Taylor have histories, track records of corruption. And now what I think is happening, again, it's another straw breaking the camel's back. And I think if we expose it enough, we might just get rid of the camel. And that's kind of what we have to do. The challenge, I think, on the back end is what are the alternatives? Right? Because we know the police department is corrupt. But it's like, what are the alternatives to make sure our community has what it needs and is safe still, as we get rid of this other kind of
element within it.
That's right, because there's a serious element of corruption in the police department, and we know for most of our communities they don't make them safer. But we know our communities do need to be safe, right? So I think as we kind of expose and do away with this, we got to build up something. So I think that's the challenge. I know there was a young girl and a father that were murdered yesterday.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's happening around the country. Like, how do we respond to violence that happens in our community as we also respond to police violence? Which I personally believe is just a symptom of the cycle of violence and poverty as a form of violence. So the communities really need resources. I say to folks all the time, police don't make communities safe, resources make communities safe. Yeah. So how do you begin to get the resources out of these police departments, especially for things they don't need, military-grade equipment, and give it to the community? That's right.
Have mayor Fisher and them reached out to y'all since y'all touched down?
No. Well, they did. They got a helicopter following us all over the place. So they reached out. They certainly reached out.
I've seen some helicopters.
No, they're like, there's been times we were giving out these flyers and the flyers for the food market in the West End the other day, like maybe a couple of days ago. Yo, the helicopter was like, we walking. The helicopter's just like getting low. I'm just like, yo, what? Y'all got a lot of time on your hands, man. You might need to be doing something with all of this, you know? And it costs a lot of money. Even to fly your helicopter for a few hours, you have they had about 3 or 4 folks in there who are getting paid.
Fuel.
That's right.
Fuel.
That's right.
We also felt like that they paying more attention to the people protesting more than the people who committing crimes now.
It's a fact.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Arrest the cops.
Yeah. Yeah. So, man, look. Oprah Winfrey put up 26 billboards around Louisville, Kentucky, right? And I saw Until Freedom on those billboards, right?
We are there.
What? First, explain the connection, and then what type of feeling was that? Did you guys know this was going to take place?
We did.
Okay. So to partner with someone like Oprah Winfrey, how did that happen? Because, you know, before you answer that, because, you know, for me, no, listen, because rightfully so, Oprah has taken her share of flack from the black community, rightfully so. And I believe that when our community views someone in a particular way, we all have the right to speak how we want to speak. But this was big for Oprah to show up in this particular way. So how did that happen?
Well, I think the visibility around Breonna Taylor's name and case, it's hard to be someone in America and not know who she is at this point, right? We've brought in celeb. Portia got arrested, Yandy got arrested, Kenny Stills, NFL player, a lot of folks got arrested. And before that, people were raising the visibility of Breonna Taylor's name. There's celebrities like Cardi B who have made Breonna Taylor's face their icon on their Instagram. So the world, her name is becoming a household name.
Right.
And, you know, Oprah is not immune to that. She got wind of Breonna Taylor, and I think the case touched her so much. She put Breonna Taylor on the cover of her magazine. She hasn't had anyone else on the cover of her magazine aside from herself. For over 20 years, I found out, I said, wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
we did too.
Right. That alone is groundbreaking. Now, what happened after that was she reached out to Breonna's mother. And they had a conversation, about how do you continue to elevate this issue. And she told Oprah she worked with Until Freedom. And that's what actually happened. And we said to her, if you want to do more, one of the things you could do is put billboards around Louisville, right? By Daniel Cameron's house, in the community, to let folks know this fight isn't over and we're going to continue to fight on. And that's pretty much how it happened, you know. And it was powerful. I mean, to know, the magazine cover, before we knew anything would happen with us, was like, wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
You know, it's Oprah, and as you said, like Oprah catches flack, I've given her some. Yeah. But to see that, it was like, okay, the tide is changing. The world is changing. We really believe that. And then for her to make a financial commitment to do something was just it was tremendously mind-blowing. And for us to be a part of it was phenomenal.
So the billboards, are there any in the exclusive neighborhoods? Because I know I've seen some in the West.
There's some by Daniel Cameron's house.
Okay.
Like, part of what we wanted the billboards to be everywhere. We said we want people who live in Daniel Cameron's neighborhood, who know he lives there, to say, listen, this man needs to do the right thing. Right?
They didn't know. They know now.
Right. Right. You know, and that was really our intention. It was like, it's not just for the community, but it's for all the folks in Louisville to know that this matters, right? This matters to someone like Oprah, and it should matter to you. And it should matter enough that you go speak to Daniel Cameron and tell him to do the right thing. And we hope his wife sees it, right? And her family sees it. And they say, hold on, wait.
This is too big. You're making this too big to ignore.
Right. Precisely, right? And because what we know is, and we've seen this tactic time and time again, where it's like, oh, something bad happens. We'll investigate. We'll do another investigation. And then we'll investigate the investigation that we started the investigation. And we see some of that tactic being used, and we're saying, listen, don't do that. Do the right thing and arrest the cops.
We saw that with Eric Gardner. It took 5 years.
Guess what?
5 years.
We were the people, I don't know if y'all know this, but y'all remember there was the Democratic debate in Detroit? And some people screamed, I can't breathe, fire Pantaleo. Go back and find it. There was a video, there was a protest that happened during the second presidential debate. They were saying, fire Pantaleo. That's the officer who killed Eric Garner. Fire Pantaleo. That was us.
Okay.
That was us. So, because we knew the mayor of New York City was there, and he was running for president, and we said, listen, champ.
Was it Mayor Giuliani?
No,
Giuliani?
No, it's not Giuliani.
It was
De
de
Blasio.
Blasio.
And we said, listen, champ, you're not running for president, and you got this guy still in the force.
Right.
And we were there, and we did that, and because of the visibility, he was on a national scale, right? Talking about running for president. Within a few days, he fired that man.
I wish you guys would have got when, I don't know if you did, when Mayor Fisher here in Louisville, he was appointed to be the president of mayors.
Wow.
So this is recently. So maybe a month ago, he appeared in D.C. at a convention.
Wow.
He is the president of all mayors nationwide, right?
Shame.
And it didn't get a lot of attention, and I wanted to get attention because I think it's a year-long position, and I don't know what all it entails, but I know that it's connected politically to the Democratic Party.
When did that happen?
Maybe a month ago. Maybe a month ago.
What's so fascinating about it to me, and I think it happens with the cops too, is like, think about it. People are actually calling for him to resign right now.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But think about it. They gave him a promotion.
Yeah.
That's true.
And
that you didn't think about. Yeah.
And that actually happens with these officers. We see that too. It's almost like white supremacy saying, we're not going to punish you when you do the wrong thing. We're going to promote you.
Yeah.
Because how are you the president of mayors and people in your city are asking you to resign? Mm-hmm. Something's wrong.
And you're not being transparent.
Listen.
So yeah, but let me shine some light on significance, because you said something that struck a chord in me. And when we talk about the media attention, and we talk about getting arrested for media attention, and we talk about these billboards alerting the public to what's going on, right? People don't realize this was very similar to what King did with Selma.
Oh, precisely.
So for those that don't know, in Alabama, you had Birmingham, you had Memphis, you had all these states that King essentially moved to, like you guys are doing now. He moved to these cities. But when you think of the 60s, you think of no cable television, no internet.
No radio. Well, they had radio.
They had radio, but no cell phones. You know,
Instagram.
So people literally in the North or outside of these particular towns, even white folks, didn't know what was happening to black folks at these protests.
Right.
So what King did was he organized a march on Selma, and when they crossed that bridge, King instructed everyone to not fight back, because in those days, if you fought back, they would dismiss it as these are just thugs fighting the police or whatever. So they walked across.
Edmund Pettis.
There it is. The news feed, the local news feed caught that, and it was dispersed out to national news feeds across the country. So for the first time in America, the American citizens saw black people marching nonviolently, peacefully, getting beat, water hoses, attack dogs, nightsticks by police officers, and that changed the movement going forward.
The late great John Lewis.
John Lewis was there.
And that's also like one of the problems that we see that's coming with this protest in Louisville is that they're using excessive force on nonviolent protesters. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
It's a part of American history.
Definitely.
That's what I've been saying to folks. I'm like, the longest running sport in American history is to whoop black folks. Yeah. Right? And sometimes it's black protesters. That's the excessive force is an American sport. And it's time for it now.
Yeah. And to your point, man, that resources are what's needed in the black community. Now, I'm one that I say that we have to fight both fights at one time, right? We have to fight the violence in our community as well as fighting against violence by police officers, right? But I'm not one to say that they're one and the same, because police officers been killing black folks since the beginning of time. Like
that's what they were created to do.
That's right. Police folks have never, like, I've had people tell me have the argument, well, they're killing us because they see us killing each other, right? No, they've been killing us long before there was a term, which I don't adhere by, the black on black crime, but long before there was an excessive amount of violence in our community. And to go back even further, I hate when people just pigeonhole this to the black community, right? You have a period in time when the Wild Wild West or the Midwest was a thing, where in the upper Midwest you had Dillinger and his boys, them robbing banks, committing mass murder. You had the Italian mafias in New York and Chicago from the 80s and 90s. Sicilians were mass murdering each other in the street.
White on white crime.
Right. So when people try to make this, they try to make this as, oh my God, we've never seen this in America before. This is a black issue. No, this is an American issue.
Oh yeah, America
we don't want to get labeled.
Exactly.
We don't want to get that label black on black. You don't never hear white on white crime. Whatever the case may be, Mexican.
80+% of all murders are committed by people of the same race. And why?
Proximity crime. Because
you commit crimes in the area that you live in.
That's right.
It's so
people that's close to you.
Right. So but to highlight and I'm not saying that crime in our community doesn't need to be highlighted. That's right. Because it doesn't. It is an issue, right? But what I'm saying is this. If you put a camera on everything, you can highlight everything. You can highlight in America every 4 minutes a child is being abducted. If you highlight a pedophile rate, if you highlight that on a major basis, people be scared to put their kids on the bus stop every morning. But we're the only group that makes the media for our particular crime in our community, when there's crime in every community. The crimes may be different, but there's crime in every community that doesn't make the 8 o'clock news every night.
You said, because with that same phenomenon of being able to make parents scared to put their kids at the bus stop, they have created a narrative and a reality for black folks by making our faces the face of criminals.
Exactly.
It's done something.
Yes.
Don't get it twisted. Yes. It's done something.
Yes. So the layers is that when you ingest that type of mental mindset in America, right? Yeah. Not only is that in the mindset of the man or woman that becomes a police officer, it's in the mindset of a juror. It's in the mindset of a judge. It's in the mindset of a prosecutor. So we're dealt a bad hand from birth.
From the rip.
I would say it's two types of laws. It's a white law and it's a black law. And that's why we get charged separately or differently whenever something happens.
Because the narrative in America is that has always been that black people are dangerous in America. And historically, black people have not been the people that have murdered and waged war in the name of conquering or in the name
of anything.
Right. Worldwide. Worldwide, we have not been a group of people that have murdered, raped, and taken over countries. We just haven't been that group of people, but somehow America has given us that particular face. So, man, we appreciate you brothers coming in, man. Brothers and sisters coming in, man. We're looking forward to working with you guys while you're here. I know today was just the beginning. Today, well, you've been doing, I've been seeing press conferences all week. And
this is our 8th day here.
8th day here. Yeah. I want you to speak on, before you leave, Joe, I want you to speak on, you have partnered up with my pastor, Pastor Chin Finley, man. Great guy, man. Too. And, I see you guys at church last week. And
we'll be there tomorrow.
So,
on time.
Can you educate people on this movement to boycott the Kentucky Derby? Because I know you guys are taking a part in that as well.
Most definitely. Pastor Finley is one of the folks that's at the forefront on the ground around boycotting Derby. And for us, we know, just taking a page out of the history books, boycotts are essential when you're confronting any kind of injustice. You have to, as we say, place pressure on folks and redistribute the pain, we often like to say. So the pain of police violence, we got to figure out a way to redistribute it, and part of it is financially. So we know there are a few events in the country that bring people out like Derby. I mean in the country, not just in Louisville, not just in Kentucky, but there are a few events in the country. And what that means are there are few events in the country that make that kind of money for a place. And what we're saying is, if Derby is important to you, Breonna needs to be important to you. If Derby is important to you, the black folks in Louisville need to be important to you. And if they're not, then Derby's not important to us, right? And it needs to be canceled. It shouldn't happen. You can't keep moving on. Life shouldn't go on. Oftentimes, when I think about Breonna's family and all the families who experience police violence, their lives are literally never the same. Right. People don't really think about the impact. There are folks who they're crying every day now, right? And what we're saying to Kentucky, what we're saying to the Derby is, this business venture shouldn't be more important than black life, right? And at some point, we have to make a stand. And for us, that's kind of where we're drawing the line in the sand. It's like, listen, this is on the horizon, and this isn't going to happen if justice for Breonna hasn't happened. We're just not going to let it happen. We'll do whatever we have in our power to stop it from transpiring, from moving forward, from you folks making a ton of money, again, on the backs of black folks. So Pastor Finley has been such a powerful voice. He's welcomed us into his faith home, which is now our faith home. So we stand beside him. He's received a lot of flack for that from white supremacist groups, and I suppose other white folks who feel like he probably talking too much and doing too much. Mm-hmm. And I believe there's a whole movement around taking back Kentucky or taking back Louisville that's saying, we're going to do whatever we want, and you can't say nothing about it. And he's been threatened, his family's been threatened. And, we told him, and I'll say it on air, we stand with you no matter what. We'll be there every Sunday. Right. We're going to make sure we're there, because a voice like his that's standing up for what's right should not meet more injustice. Like, why does a man who says nothing violent met with more violence? Why is he threatened? Why is his family threatened? Folks are exposing themselves, but for us, we're going to continue to stand with him.
And he's supposed to be Christian folks, right?
Man, listen.
Whatever. Ain't it always?
I'm just saying, I'm saying, like, it is crazy how much, like, you read in the, like, say y'all had a press conference. Have y'all ever paid attention to the comments that comes when y'all do a press conference from the wave, the
media outlets on Facebook, whatever? Yeah.
I mean, they are very, very, you can see,
racist and brutal.
Racism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our friend Linda Sarsour was one of the co-founders. There was a comment that was like, Linda Sarsour is out here with her pit bulls. So you see the levels of hate, for women, for folks who are Muslim or practice Islam, for folks that are black. We see the ways in which hate manifests, and it's just so unfortunate. Like, I always think about it. It's like, it's 2020, man. Yeah. And we still dealing with what we were dealing with in 1820. Yeah. And it's like, America cannot continue along this trajectory in the way it does. And America, in the midst of a national uprising, people protesting around the country, in fact, around the world, America still doesn't get it. It's a shame.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what's the spark. You're gonna see this in the next coming years, right? And the thing is that you have these die-hard American racists that are in fear of the browning of America, and they can't stop the browning of America.
They can't stop it. They can't stop it.
So I think the last projection I saw was by 2050. Yep. The predominant race in America is going to be a mixed race. So it's going to be like a lighter-skinned person, maybe like a person in Puerto Rico. You know what I mean? So of that color. And you have people that don't want that to happen. Yeah. Now, before we leave on that, we're talking about Churchill Downs, right? And we're talking about the Kentucky Derby. I want to inform people that don't know, and my numbers may be off because I should have got this together before I came, but I believe in 8 states, Churchill Downs owns 18 other horse racing facilities. Wow. Yeah, they're not just a Louisville thing. So they own facilities in Louisiana. When you go to these different places, you see like different different race parks. Churchill Downs is the parent company for a lot. I believe it's 18 in 8 other states. So Churchill Downs is a billion-dollar industry. The horse racing industry is a global billion-dollar industry, and shutting down the Kentucky Derby not only shuts down resources, finances, and money in Louisville, it shuts them down.
National ripple effects. And guess what? It need to happen.
Yeah.
You gonna race your horses? Not today, champ.
Right. Yeah, man. So okay, so today trying to get all your before we leave, we gotta speak about this.
Oh yeah.
So we have
wow.
The day of action.
Missed that.
He's having a real good time.
We gotta get y'all back up here, man. We gotta get y'all back up here.
I'll be in loads of trouble. So actually next weekend, I'll say this. Every Tuesday we're calling Good Trouble Tuesday. So every Tuesday we'll be in the community doing something, and in honor of John Lewis, we call it Good Trouble Tuesday. So, go to untilfreedom.com, find out what we have going on Tuesday. Today we're doing a food giveaway, free produce. We had, I think, 2,000 boxes. So if you're in the Louisville area, you can stop at the Urban League and get you some produce. You can go to the website, find out where we are. We're moving around throughout the city. So every day of the week, except for Wednesday, we have something going on. Now, the special weekend is what we're calling Breonna Con. And that is the weekend of August 23rd through the 25th. So we're going to have a lot of special surprises. I don't want to give too much away. But from the 23rd to the 25th, leading up to the day of action on the 25th, it'll be Breonna Con. The Monday before, we're going to do policy roundtable. We're bringing in some local politicians, some national politicians. Kutera, who was instrumental on passing No More No Knocks, is going to explain how that happened and what else needs to happen throughout the state. Attica Scott will be there talking about Breonna's Law. So we have a tremendous amount of things planned. The Saturday and Sunday before the Monday and Tuesday, we're doing a lot of giveaways for the community too. We have Yandy and Portia coming back to do some very special things in the community. So go to untilfreedom.com. Breonna Con weekend, August 23rd to the 25th. We need you there. We want you there. Come be a part of history.
All right, people. So it's the day of action. This is Tuesday, August 25th. Is there? Let me look on the back. Is there a time?
Well, it's going to be all day. On Saturday and Sunday, it's all day.
Okay.
We're still figuring out location.
Okay.
So follow us on Instagram to see those updates. The other thing on the back of the flyer we've been giving out is really pushing folks to vote. We were doing some registration today because, as we talked about, we got Ditch Mitch, man. Yeah. Like, there's some very important elections. We often talk about in the movement to think globally but act locally. Like, the presidential election is important, but those local elections, those Louisville elections, will in many ways shape the country and certainly shape our community. So folks need to get registered to vote. Today we're registering folks to vote at the Urban League if you're not registered. And make sure on Tuesday, November 3rd, folks, the absentee ballot deadline, right? And the request deadline is on October 27th, which is my birthday. And the voter registration deadline is October 5th, right? So these dates are very important if you want to be engaged in the voting process. And I mean, regardless of what folks say around the presidential election, you just got to get out there and vote. These local elections, too much is riding for the city of Louisville, for Kentucky, and the whole United States.
Before we get out of here, let me read. You have 3 listed demands on the back of this flyer.
That's a fact.
And I love that you included one name in this because a lot of people don't know the name of the guy that actually wrote the warrant. You included that. I like that.
Joshua James.
Yeah. So number one demand is, these are justice for Breonna Taylor demands from Until Freedom. So number one is, we demand Joshua James, Jonathan Mattingly, Brent Hankinson, and Miles Cosgrove be arrested and charged for the murder of Breonna Taylor.
Arrest the cops.
Demand number 2. We demand the resignation of Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher. Demand number 3. We demand an end to qualified immunity and no-knock warrants statewide.
That's right.
So those are some very, very big demands. And the voter registration deadline is Monday, October 5th. So the voter registration deadline, people, is Monday, October 5th. Don't show up after that day and try to register, and then you find out in the presidential election you can't vote. Yeah, so that's very important. The absentee ballot request deadline. So this was the big thing because we just had absentee ballots here in Louisville. A lot of people missed the deadline. The deadline for absentee ballot is Tuesday, October 27th. Yeah. So it's October 27th, people. So if you plan to vote with an absentee ballot, make sure you do so and pay attention, people, because Trump is already trying to
the post office.
They're moving mailbox, moving mailboxes all across the country.
He's trying to interfere with his voter suppression.
He is interfering.
Yeah. So be on the lookout for that. And the absentee ballot return deadline. So you have to have this return, meaning I'm assuming a postmark on the envelope. And dealing with Trump, the deadline is November 3rd. Dealing with Trump, you better have it in there by the 1st.
Yes, that's a fact.
Probably the week before the 25th or something.
So
don't be late.
So any information you can go to untilfreedom.com. Again, that's untilfreedom.com. Make sure you follow them on all social media. Is it Facebook, Instagram?
That's right. Twitter as well.
And Twitter. So follow them. Welcome to the city, man. We're glad to have you guys here.
We appreciate it.
We'll have you guys back up here, man, because we want to get
most definitely. We can bring everyone up.
Bring everybody up, man, and we'll definitely be plugging all the events you have while you're here in Louisville.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, people, for tuning in to Urban Voices Radio. We are here on Power 106 FM every Saturday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And on that note, people, we out.